Thank you, Arthi. So this is a team effort, really, with several members of my research group, Sea Grant agents, Joy Hazel and Betty Storgler, and Ken Lieber from Mote Marine Lab. And the background here is that currently Florida's saltwater fisheries are managed centrally over fairly large spatial scales. So some of them are managed on a coastwide basis, some are divided into northern, southern parts along the coast, but that's about the finest scale that our management reaches down to. But a lot of our coastal and particularly inshore fisheries show variation and dynamics at relatively local scales, i.e. sort of estuary scale, 50 to 100 miles along the coast. And many stakeholders involved in those fisheries have very in-depth knowledge of the local fisheries conditions and also care very intensely about the fisheries in their local areas. And it turns out that actually a lot of those fishermen do not travel very far when they go fishing. They have relatively limited home ranges where most of their fishing happens, and they know, they have very in-depth knowledge. And they feel that they have limited opportunities to make input to management decisions, both generally and pertaining to the particular areas where they're experts and very engaged. And so our question was, what is the scope for developing a place-based of cooperative governance layer for the fisheries governance system in Florida? And place-based governance accounts for local conditions in management, and it builds on the stakeholders' knowledge, sense of place, and commitment to their place. So it's both accounting for local conditions and making use of what the stakeholders have to contribute. So the response here in our project was to essentially design and field test the idea of fisheries forums as venues for engaging stakeholders in their fisheries in the long term, promote in-depth consideration of local fisheries issues, improve links between stakeholder knowledge and science, and then represent place-based perspective to management agencies. And those management agencies are not only, say, the FWC as our state fisheries management agency, but agencies that deal with habitat and environmental management, estuary programs, water management district, counties. So because a lot of that environmental management actually happens on smaller spatial scales anyway. So the fisheries forums, the idea is, would be sort of in between the individual fishers, guides, and non-fishers locally and the larger agencies. So sort of an in-between organization, if you like. The way we did this project is we had a pre-intervention sort of stakeholder analysis. We did interviews, we did some surveys. And then we had 20 months of actually trialing this fisheries forums process. And then we had a post-intervention sort of interview and feedback cycle. The way we went about it is that the project team organized the meetings, provided facilitation and logistics support, and brought in scientific and technical expertise in response to basically questions that came up in the forums. The participating stakeholders decided on the forum structure and process, the issues that would be addressed. And they were also expected to take on progressively more leadership of the forums and provide more of the logistic support for it. And then, as I said, we brought in outside experts as needed. We trialed this in 2 places in Sarasota Bay, where the forum was anchored in sort of Mote Marine Lab, and in Charlotte Harbor, where the forum was anchored by the Sea Grant agents, Joy and Betty. This is an example of one of the forums in Charlotte Harbor. You can see group discussions going on here. An example of the sort of setup with the this is the Sarasota Forum. So you can see the Sarasota Forum met bi-monthly, every 2 months, and the Charlotte Harbor Forum met every month, and this gives you an idea of the sort of structure. Often there was a speaker, and there was some activity towards identifying and dealing with local fisheries issues. We also developed a number of tools for engagement of stakeholders, including a spatially explicit survey where people could identify their favorite fishing spots in the area and characterize issues with those areas in terms of environment, boater interaction, fisheries, and so on. Okay, we're coming to the results. So this is from the pre-implementation survey we did in those counties. So we surveyed fishing license holders in those areas prior to establishing the forums, and just some tidbits here that of the people we surveyed, the vast majority, almost 90%, felt that public input should be sought in fisheries management, but only 13% felt that managers would listen to that input. And those who perceived that they were able to take meaningful action to provide input to management were more satisfied with the outcomes of management. And so you can see that correlation there. And this was actually really interesting to see. So if you have people who feel that they can meaningfully engage, they are much more happy about the same outcome, if you like. So it's definitely also from the agency perspective worthwhile to promote that sense of meaningful engagement because you get much happier stakeholders. So as we started the forum, there was sort of lively back and forth in the local fishing papers. These are clippings from Waterline. This is a Charlotte Harbor-based fishing paper, and so you can see some stakeholders coming out in support of, our fishing, our voice, nothing happens by itself, get your act together, get engaged, but also questions about, so how realistic is this really to have more localized management? So we had a nice vigorous debate. The forums, and this is so in orange is the Sarasota Bay Forum, in blue the Charlotte Harbor. And they went through a similar process of discussing who should be involved, what should be the forum process and structure, what issues would be dealt with. And then we had those surveys and so they decided the Sarasota Bay Forum eventually focused very much on habitat issues, particularly to do with canals in the adjacent to the bay. The Charlotte Harbor Forum homed in on fishing influencing boater behavior. So there's a lot of issues to do with speeding in zones where people like to fish and so on. And they came up with essentially ideas for differential speed and sort of use zones that would be implemented as educational zones. So this would not be a binding regulation, but a way of essentially designing a system of speed zones that would serve the fisheries but would not be obligatory. As it ended up, this is the participation we had in the forums. And you can see, so Charlotte Harbor shot up to a lot of participation quite early on. And this is actually this very active meeting where we had 70 people was when someone spread the rumor that we were going to ban commercial fishing in Charlotte Harbor. And so all the commercial guys came out. And some of them stuck with it. But then you can see, so it came down in participation. It eventually collapsed shortly after the project pulled out, mostly as a result of ongoing conflicts around some of the issues that were discussed in the forum, and essentially a need for continued conflict resolution and uptake that exceeded what could be delivered to the forum at that stage, whereas the Sarasota Bay Forum had a much slower start, but it eventually, it persisted and it actually increased in in participation. And this is partly a result of the topics that they chose, and partly of the fact that there was always less conflict, and they brought in a lot of support from the county and the city, and so it really bloomed into something where they're taking a meaningful action in terms of habitat improvement in those canals around the bay. So we did a post-evaluation, and among the positive things that were brought up, learned something new, interacted with new stakeholders. They felt forums should be repeated, but with some changes, and this was mostly Charlotte Harbor respondents. Negative, lack of resulting action, so they felt they wanted to see more action more quickly than they were getting. Limited participation from those in power, and difficulties focusing and limiting issues. And so just want to run you through some of the big picture things that we've learned from those forums. One is that it's actually very possible to bring engaged fishers together, to bring that first-hand local environmental and fisheries knowledge to bear on fisheries management decision-making in the broadest sense. The knowledge was often complementary to scientific knowledge, and we had some really good exchanges about areas where that wasn't, where there were, discrepancies, and we have been able to resolve many of those. The fishers were able to identify and prioritize important issues and actions. And the perceptions of key issues evolved over time, and that was very interesting. So it started off with a focus on fishing regulations, but actually it then very much went into environment, interaction between stakeholders and so on. So the issues changed that people were trying to address the longer they thought about what really the most important issues were that they were trying to address. Forums created new opportunities for fishers to engage with both county and bay level organizations to address issues like water quality, habitat, and so on. Personal interactions in the forums can build community and sort of address ingrained conflicts. But where that happens, and we had a lot of that in Charlotte Harbor, but eventually it needed more and more conflict management than we were able to deliver. But it did lead to exchanges and often positive exchanges between the commercial and recreational stakeholders, and that does not often happen. Fishers were keen to contribute knowledge and ideas, but more reluctant to take on leadership or logistic support roles. And to succeed in the long term, really, the forums need facilitation and logistic support, funding for actions, and buy-in from management organizations. And stronger guidance on the process and establishment of local support systems than we were able to provide initially, but we are able to provide given the experience that we've gained from doing these pilot tests would help future forum activities to succeed.